Okay, Paul, so obviously a lot of much improved performance against Charlton, deserved to come away from that game with something. Has there been a positive response in training from the players?
I think a disappointment still, because the performance is one thing, but I think I spoke to you guys and said there is, a lot of talk now linked to process, performance, and the kind of buzzwords a lot of the time, and it's never been my big thing to get too sort of drawn into. If you see good performances, then you hope results follow, but at the same time, I said last week in the dressing room, I would have rather have been in Charlton's dressing room in terms of getting the 3 points, irrespective of performance. So I think we have to be careful of getting too carried away with that. It was a slightly easier defeat to take in terms of, I think there were quite a lot of good performances and a better team performance, which I think you have to take some encouragement from that in the cold light of day. But at the same time, as I said, football's about getting points on the board and winning games of football, and at the minute we haven't obviously done that enough. We knew it was going to be a tough start, and the reality is every week will be tough, as in, I'm sure we'll get to talk about it, Mansfield will be tomorrow. So in terms of training, it's another new week. You sort of shake that feeling off, that disappointment, and look towards the game. Now, some of that was, specifically aimed at Mansfield, and some of it's just training, in terms of wanting to see players work hard, wanting to see players try and improve, and that's what a week's training looks like, really.
Well, you obviously mentioned Mansfield there. You're obviously eager to get that next win on the board, which I think you've said as well. Everyone is really eager to get it in, but it's not going to be easy tomorrow, is it?
No, and I think there might be a little bit of a feeling, as in, Mansfield's come up. That's a very winnable game, and they haven't got probably the riches of Wrexham. Certainly not as much hype around it. Same with Stockport to a slightly lesser degree, but been heavily backed. But Nigel's hasn't had the riches that those teams have had, but they've been had a good budget for the league that they were in. I think eventually got themselves out of there, and Nigel's done a good job. They've always been a team that we know quite well from my time in that league. Always play good football. At previous clubs, certainly a cup game, they give us a real run around. In the league we had a better fixture against them. It was a good game. They like to play football. They've got their way of playing, and in the main an experienced group of players that I think know the jobs. Quite a lot of them have been together for a period of time, and know what they need to do to bring success. So certainly not an easy game.
Just on Tommy O'Reilly, I found it interesting your quotes about maybe him as a 10, you like your 10s to get in the box, where you felt as he was sitting on the edge. Do you potentially maybe see he could fit in another position, maybe elsewhere, than if he is a player that likes to sit on the edge of the box? Yeah,
I mean, we played him wide, haven't we, quite a bit, and I think we've kind of toed and froed, and maybe depending on the opponent, of where we feel he could best fit. It might be that he could play more than one position within a game. You move players around, but it's something that we've talked about, I've highlighted it, shown him the clips, and it's for Tommy to take on board realistically. What I would say is he's very receptive in those meetings, and I do think there's a young player there that wants to get better.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how's he sort of taking that feedback on board?
I can only talk obviously face to face, but very good. As I said, I think from the off we seem to have a good relationship, and he knows that he's here from Aston Villa to improve certain parts of his game, and I want to try and help him do that. And ultimately a big part of that, a major part of it, is down to, and it's not only Tommy, this is about any players, it's down to them. We can try and help, facilitate, highlight some of the areas that players can improve, as well as still concentrate on what they're good at. But in particular for the loan lads, I think they come, like from Arsenal, for instance, we've got their individual report and plan for Charles, where they've, when possible, we'll try and work on some of those things that are there for him to get better. Some of that will naturally happen in terms of the games, and some of it will happen on the training pitch. But that's just kind of natural, that they've sent players out, they've dropped to a lower level than where they're currently, where their employers are at least, whether they're at that, the forefront of that first team at this moment in time. But it's to improve, and then, as I said, that's down to the players to understand that and really work on it and try and improve.
It's nice to have numbers on the bench now and those options, and I suppose a headache for you at times on selecting your 11.
Yeah.
Obviously we've seen like players like Taylor Perry who've done well but then maybe had to miss out. Is that sort of on what you see in the week and judging by an opponent, and how nice is it to have those options now after all those injuries you started the season with? Yeah,
it is nice. You'd rather have that headache than not. Of course, it does cause you some potential issues and take up more of your headspace, thinking about who to play, who to maybe leave out. Part of it is the training pitch. In some ways, I kind of wish it could be more, that you're not, if you weren't dictated to by positions, for example, at times, in terms of selecting a bench, certainly. But I do, certainly if people have been really poor in training or shown the wrong attitude, you hope that you're in a position where you can almost make an example of that and said, no, that's not good enough. Someone else is going to take that place. But it's competition. And what I would say is, deadline day wasn't that long ago. We brought a couple of players in on deadline day itself. Leo joined us later. Charles joined a little bit later. We're still in, although seem to have played quite a few games, we're still very early in terms of, trying to give people opportunities to bed in, to really understand what we're asking of them. So naturally, some team selections, they're always going to be questioned, of course. Everyone's an expert. That's, we do it. I do it myself with England. Always go to that one. We'd all pick a different team than what the manager picks, more off or near enough. But there's, there probably is more into it. Whether that's, like I said, training pitch, whether that's you just idea what you have in your mind and you want to give it more than one game or 60 minutes in a game to come to fruition. So. Competition is what we're striving for, and again, I understand people have their opinions, but there is obviously reasons to the decisions you make.
And do those players that you've got respond well to those competition for places? Do you think that ups their game a bit?
I guess it's early stages really with this group to truthfully answer that, but I would hope so. I think I watched the Arsenal game last night and a comment was made about Martinelli and Trossard, and I was very much in Rio Ferdinand's camp. Now we're talking about obviously an absolute elite team in Arsenal, but he said, well, if you can't handle sort of competition, then probably at the wrong place, and that'd be a concern. And that's how I view it. Football's competitive. It's meant to be. I've said this before various times. Your journey as a young player is you're probably your best player in your school or your Sunday league team. You go to an academy, all of a sudden the standard goes up. The lucky ones maybe are still the best players, and then they might get to be a youth team player. Competition's got stronger again. Then in our case, you're thrown into maybe a first team environment, or you go out on loan. First team environment, you're probably not going to be that best player. So what do? Do you crumble, or do you think, right, I'm going to work at my game, I'm going to get better, I'm going to improve, and eventually I'm going to get there? And that's what these lads have to try to do. If they're not in the team this week, it might be next week. It might be coming on and making a real difference. Then I can't ignore it, and the next game they're in. I'm a big believer in competition. Some people might be comfortable with if they're at a club and it's like, I know I'm going to play no matter what. I still think longer term that I don't see that really works and gets the best out of a person.
Just finally, ahead of this weekend, any fresh injury concerns, and could we see George Nurse potentially coming in to be featured as well, because he obviously came on as a sub. How close is he potentially to maybe a start?
I think in terms of overall, just to answer that part firstly, we have got a couple of concerns going into the game. As always, I'll keep that to myself, not alert Nigel and Mansfield before the team sheets go in. But and then with George, as I've said, I think a few times already, he's been injured a long time. The positive yet again is another week's training that he's got through, and will benefit him. You know, the competition, as we just alluded to, has got to be there. And just my other thing in terms of whoever we're talking about who's not in the team, it's like, that's fine, but who do you want to see come out of the team? And not you specifically, but fans. And again, they'll have their opinion, but I think, you know, in terms of, you look at it, Mal has done very well last season. He's done okay this season, I think, in the main. And that's his direct competition at this moment in time. I see that position more so. If we change formation, then I think that opens up another slot that George can fill quite comfortably.
And Jordan Roster potentially, could he feature?
Jordan's trained. And again, I'm going to be totally truthful with you right now. I haven't thought about the bench, as we say. I know what my team is, but I haven't decided on the bench as yet. That's something I'll look at this afternoon, speak with the staff. Always try and get some of their opinions, see if there's anything that, you know, gives me any food for thought in terms of their feelings towards it. And sometimes I might even wake up in the morning and think, no, I'm going a different way. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm a big believer in your gut giving you not always the right answers, but I think you should follow it at times. So that's always how I've worked. I think some people find that odd or strange sometimes, but it's not served me too bad over the years. So I'm going to stick with that for now.
Everyone's got their own way of working, haven't they? Go on tomorrow.
Thanks very much.